Welcome to Courageous Truth. My name is Winston Munsami, and it's an absolute pleasure having you here today. If you are someone who loves the truth and have no problem with being straightforward and to the point, then this channel is probably for you. Do consider subscribing, hit the notification bell so you can stay up to date with everything we're doing here. A few days ago, we asked the question, should the church care for the poor today? And we looked at the pages of the New Testament, and it became emphatically clear that 100% yes, the church should care for the poor today. Today, I want to go one step further and provide a solution. We know the church should care for the poor. We know in many cases they're not caring for the poor. In fact, they are probably abusing the poor, taking from the poor. But let's find a solution. And to find a solution, we have to ask this question. How does the church care for the poor today? And to answer the question, how does the church care for the poor, we cannot shy away from another straightforward question. In fact, how we answer the next question will put into perfect perspective everything we speak about today. And the question is, what is the purpose for church offerings? When the church began in Acts 2, what was the intention of offerings being collected? What was the intention and purpose for monies in the church? There is a purpose. And to find our answer, we have to go back to the pages of the New Testament when the church began. Because if the question is, what is the purpose of offerings, and if we are allowed to answer that question with our own mind and with our own thinking, we'll say, well, the money is for purchasing buildings. The money is for paying for the church cars and lands. When we are allowed to answer that question with our own ideas, then anything goes. Anything is justified. But to find an accurate answer, what was the purpose for offerings in the church, we have to go back to Scripture. And if we go back to Acts chapter 2, when the church began, let me tell you what was happening, friends. You had people who were joining the church, who were being converted, not just in the mind, but in the heart. And they were bringing everything they didn't need. They were bringing all their money. They were selling lands and properties and everything they didn't need. And they were bringing all the profits, all the monies, and they were laying it at the apostles' feet. And in no time, the Bible tells us that there was no poor people amongst them. Everybody who was poor was taken care of. The underprivileged was provided for. The homeless was provided for. The hungry was provided for. The naked was provided for. Those who didn't have had. And this wasn't just a one-time thing in Acts 2. In Acts 4, when the church grew into thousands and thousands of people, the same thing is seen. People brought their monies and they gave it to the apostles. And the apostles will make sure that everybody had their needs met. There was equality amongst all the people. Everybody had all things in common. The poor was provided for. That was the purpose for offerings in the church. Let me make two observations before we go further into the video. Because today in 2025, you have a lot of soothsayers who are preaching the gospel. And they say stuff like, bring your monies and leave it at our feet. They say, remember how they brought the monies and left it at the apostles' feet, and how the Lord blessed the poor and nobody lacked anything? Leave it at our feet and we'll show you how the Lord will bless you. Well, let me just say this, that the poor wasn't provided for because people were bringing monies and leaving it at the apostles' feet. Don't get it twisted. The poor was provided for because the monies that were being left at the apostles' feet was actually being used to care for the poor. It wasn't banked. It wasn't saved in some account somewhere. It was shared with the poor. So there's no doctrine here that says, bring your money and leave it at your pastor's feet. That's not what's happening here in Acts 2. The reason why people are bringing their monies and leaving it at the apostles' feet is because they actually trust the integrity of the apostles. They believe that the apostles were called by God and they will actually do what God put them there to do. Not steal, but share. Not become rich, but provide each other's needs. And let me just say this, the apostles in the New Testament were playing many roles. There were the apostles who were founding the church, building the church, but there were elders, there were pastors, there were shepherds, they were overseeing the church. And in no time after the church began, the apostles decided to find other men who will help them. And the purpose for finding these other men was to make sure that the poor lacked nothing. And the Bible tells us in the book of Acts how the apostles found 7 men who played the role of deacons, who were responsible for making sure that there was no poor amongst them. That if there was poor, that they were cared for. If they were hungry, they were cared for. This is what's happening there. And so the question, what is the purpose for offerings in the church? Here's the clear answer. The purpose for offerings in the church is to provide for the poor. Now let me go one step further, because in 2025 things are different. Today when we have church, we generally have a time in our church services where we collect offerings. Where we might sing a song and we'll send money bags from pew to pew, and somebody might come up and say a few words before we give the offering. They will use scripture to encourage giving. Some of them have ulterior motives, some of them are sincere, but whatever the reasons are, there's a time in the church where monies are taken. And listen to me very carefully, friend. This is not once a month, this is weekly, every single week. And the question comes into play, why is it that the church should be providing for the poor once a year during Christmas, annually during Easter? Why? Why is it that we should be caring for the poor once every year or once every month when in fact we are getting money every week? We should be caring for the poor every week. This is not controversial. Now, some people today might say, Winston, well, the purpose of offerings in the church today is to pay our pastors, is to pay our leaders. And if that's your mindset and your perspective, okay, that's fine. I have no problem with that. But we have to start developing a mindset that says it's about time that we start paying our church leaders salaries that are modest and humble and simple, not exorbitant. Because it makes no sense when everybody in the church earns nothing more than 10,000 Rand a month, but the pastor earns 60, 70, 80, 90,000 Rand a month. This is a problem. It's a problem because they work much harder and earn way lesser, and you don't work as hard as them, and you earn 10 times the amount. You have people working in call centers, working till 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning. They don't come home, they don't get to see their families, and they live from hand to mouth. In most cases, if you drive past all these church buildings, they are closed. Most probably these church leaders are in some restaurant somewhere, enjoying some hotel fellowship somewhere, or sitting in their house somewhere, or maybe visiting somebody in hospital, praying for the sick, and you think it is worthy to be compared to the hard work of others? And that's the reason why so many young people today don't want to work. That's the reason why so many young people want to become pastors. Because it's an easy way to make quick money. Because the way we handle monies in the church today is based on our ideas, not from scripture. Because if our ideas were from scripture, we'll provide for the poor. And so this is my appeal to those of you who have the mentality that says, let's pay our pastor first. Here's my appeal to you. Pay your pastor. Even if you want to pay your pastors exorbitant, go ahead. But make sure the balance of the money is used for the poor. Don't bank it. Don't save it. You know, I worked at a bank for a number of years. I had the opportunity of working with many pastors and many churches. You know, they will come and they will bank all their offerings that they've taken on Sunday. They will, deposit this into their bank account. And one day I remember I asked this pastor a question, and the question led to an argument, and I had to walk away because he got upset with a simple question. And that question led to him becoming very upset. But I asked him, I said, Pastor, why are you saving the church money? What's the purpose of this? What's the need for putting the church money into the bank account? And of course, he gave me all the reasons. They need to pay for this building. They need to pay for that car and this bus and all the rest. Friends, that is not the purpose for offerings in the church. Those are secondary reasons. The primary purpose is to care for the poor. And here's the question I had ever since I was in my 20s. The question is, why is it that we should be banking money that isn't ours, knowing that we're going to collect even more every week? You have to be a spiteful, selfish person to do that. And we are talking about assemblies and gatherings where they collect hundreds of thousands of rands a week, sometimes millions of rands. And the question is, what are they doing for the poor? It's not sufficient. When we have a lot, we have to give. It's not ours to keep. This is not controversial. I'm just telling you the truth. It's not yours to keep. Give it away. There's one thing saving your own money for your family, perhaps for your children's education, etc. There's another thing taking people's monies and investing it and saving it. And the question is, for what? It's not yours. You've earned your salary already. Why not take whatever else is there and give it away? It's the people's earnings. They've given it to you for the purpose of giving it away. This is the example we see in the New Testament. When I say, do not save it and hoard it and store it up, it benefits nobody. The reason I get to that conclusion is because of Jesus' parable. Jesus told us a parable in Luke chapter 12. Here's Luke chapter 12, verse 13 to 21. Verse 13, someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." Verse 14, Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge between the two of you?" Verse 15, then Jesus said to them, "Watch out and be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." Verse 16, and Jesus told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Verse 17, he thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Verse 18, then he said to himself, "This is what I will do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger barns, and there I will store all my surplus grain." Verse 19, and I'll say to myself, "You have plenty of grain laid up for many years to come. So take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." Verse 20, Jesus said, "But I will say to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you prepared for yourself?" Verse 21, Jesus says, "And this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God." And friends, how are we rich toward God? When we are rich toward the poor.